Well, good morning, and welcome to our Deathwave tutorial. Hope you're having a wonderful day. And like I said, today we're going to go over kind of what causes death waves, how you know you're in a death wave, how to get out of a death wave, and just a general kind of philosophy on death care. So usually, I think it's milestone 6. Right around that time, you get high density, and you're just excited that you can now really take off and expand your city. And usually at that point, maybe you have like 3 tiles, I'm gonna say, maybe 4. So you build out your first 2 with your light density stuff, and you're like, okay, now I've been making some money, so I have a little bit of cash reserves, so I can go ahead and expand my city. And you build out your next area with your road system, because now you can kind of like plan things out a little bit better. Like I said, you got the money to spend on building out a road system, and then you go ahead and you pause the game. So this is rule number 1: don't pause the game. And you just go like this. Okay, yeah, let's put all this high density in, like that, right? And then you unpause the game. And what happens? Everybody moves in right around the same time. And the way the game works, so models a person moving in, whatever it is. Maybe they move in at age 20, family people with kids and all that fun stuff. Then they go to work and they go to shopping at your commercial areas, and then it models them to die at, usually at 70 something or 80 something, depending on your elder care coverage and that kind of stuff. So then they all die at the same time, and the next thing you know, 60 years later or whatever, you did this, you end up having all these skull and crossbones, right, on all your buildings, and you're like, what's going on? How come I have all these deaths? And that's why. You pause the game, you zoned out a bunch of stuff. And it's also applies to commercial. Okay, high density commercial, same thing. You need death care coverage in all zoning types: office, commercial, industrial. People die everywhere. They oddly die just as much in commercial and industrial areas as they do at home. So they all die at the same time. Then boom, you're in a death wave. And of course, it doesn't come till like I said, maybe 60 years later in game, and you maybe have done this many times because you didn't know, because it's not like it happens immediately. And then you're gonna have now multiple successions of death waves. Like I said, the indication is you got a whole bunch of skull and crossbones, and you're like, oh my god, what just happened to my city? And you're overwhelmed. And then, of course, coinciding with that is more residential demand. So then what can happen is people die. And maybe you have really good death care coverage, and you don't realize it because maybe your death care is kind of keeping up with it, but all of a sudden you have this big spike in residential demand for oddly no reason. So then you start zoning again, because you're like, it tells me I have more residential demand, so I'm going to go ahead and zone. And then you're like, then later on, it gets worse. Well, why is that? Well, because right around that time, all these people died. And then you went ahead and added more people. So now those people, the people that died, get replaced by people that, the people that died are replaced by their kids, so to speak. So they're like on the same timer. And then what happens is too, you zone a bunch more residential, and then more people move in right around that same time, and then they're on the next kind of like cycle. So the kids die, say 60 years later, and so there's the new people that come in 60 years later. So now you like doubled your deaths, so to speak. And then of course it compounds over and over until eventually everyone dies at the same time, and your city is destroyed. So you don't want to do that. So how to get out of a death wave is to first recognize you're in one. And how do you recognize that you're in one? Usually is when you see a bunch of skull and crossbones all over the place. And what you need to do is look at, there's a couple maps in here you can look at. So if you go to the city info, you can look at population change if you want. Usually you can look at death rate. You can see a big spike in death rate in that one spot. That was bad. That was a death wave. You'll see these big large spikes here. And then what you want to do at that point is come in here and look at influx. And that quite coincides with the influx. You see the influx right there? See if it does coincide. See how they do coincide? Those two peaks? slightly out of phase, if you want to say, slightly shifted. That's because your influx is like your kind of like your immigrants moving in. And what you want to do is you want to recognize, you can click on this and you see big spike. But for the most part, I have avoided Deathwaves because I've been playing long enough to know to not zone the way I described before. And then we'll kind of go over that in just a second. And then once again, you can see your spike, and then you say, okay, I see people moving in. What you're gonna do is you're just not gonna do anything. You're not gonna zone any residential. You're gonna have high residential demand. And you're gonna let people move in, and they'll kind of trickle in, so that'll kind of flatten things out a little bit. And as immigrants move in, I believe there's a chance that when they do move in, they can be at different ages. So then once again, you kind of get people coming in at different ages, so then they're going to die at different times, and then they're going to come in slower than if you zoned a bunch of stuff. So it's going to kind of flatten out the future death wave a little bit. So it's going to, over time, kind of work its way out. So those are the two big things you want to do, and you should always also look at like your like pie graph there, right in the center, the zone building distribution. And ideally, from what I found, is you want to have roughly 50% residential, about a quarter to a third ish, probably, you know, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit unique for each city, but this is good ballpark just to look at a glance. Now 50% residential, about a quarter commercial, about a quarter of industrial and office, and of the industrial and office quarter, you want that to be an eighth office, an eighth industrial. That makes sense. So right now I'm a little heavy on residential, and I'm a little heavy on office space. And you can also, what else you can use in here to kind of see where you're at is unemployment. So my unemployment is about 6%, which means I have slightly more people than jobs, and ideally 4 to 6% is pretty good, and that's actually right about where I want to be. And you can also look at this map here, and you can see I'm importing some purple goods, so my generic goods, we'll call them my regular goods. So my industry that I have is not producing enough goods to supply my city, so I'm importing goods from outside, so therefore I should actually zone a little bit more of the yellow generic industry. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's how you can see why so I should zone a little bit more of that, and if I bring my unemployment down to about 4%, which is probably the perfect spot, my graph, my chart will probably even out a little bit better, and I'll be more of kind of like what I said, the residential 50%. It'll increase the yellow industrial side here. It'll increase that a little bit if I increase, once you increase one thing, it kind of shifts everything around, right? Because it's a pie chart, it adds up to 100%. So if I had a little bit more residential, a little bit more industrial, that would pull out the jobs and give me 4% employment, and then also expand that, I would say yellowish orange colored slice there, and then of course now it's going to push the commercial and everything over, and it will look really nice. It'll be, like I said, half residential, about a quarter commercial, and then a quarter between office and industrial, and of that quarter, eighth office, eighth industrial. I hope that helps you there. All right, so that's Deathwaves. That's how they kind of come about. When the game's paused, you zone a lot of stuff, and usually it's when you get high density, because that's when you really get a lot of people coming in. Commercial, any zone type can give you a Deathwave. Commercial, high density commercial, or high density residential. And that's how you get out of it. You gotta wait. You gotta recognize you're in one by seeing a bunch of skulls, crossbones, and wait and let immigrants move in and try and fill those spots. Don't compound it by zoning more. All right, so deathcare in general. In general, you want to have per tile about 2 cemeteries and 1 crematorium, 3 cemeteries and 1 crematorium. Ideally, this is what I found, is a ratio of about 2.5 cemeteries per crematorium is kind of like the money spot, is the sweet spot. Why is that? Well, cemeteries are cheap. They're like $160 a week. So always just throw them down. They make people happy. Put them down in the residential areas. They're really They said they're cheap, they're easy, but you do need to empty them. Crematories are expensive. They're $720 in respect to the cemeteries. Those work pretty well, like in your commercial areas. And you, like I said, for light density, you can probably get away with about 3 cemeteries and 1 crematorium. 1 crematorium will handle each cemetery, or sorry, one crematorium can empty out three different cemeteries if you have those 3 cemeteries on a rotating schedule. So if we look at my death care here, I have a crematorium here, a cemetery here, a cemetery here, and a cemetery here. This was tile number 1, so it's mostly light density. Has a little, I rezoned it a little bit with high density. Some high density in the front here, and a little bit a lot of light density in the back. Right. So this cemetery kind of handles this residential neighborhood. This crematorium can get to this one, and this one, and this one. This cemetery handles this residential neighborhood, and part of this, of course, when we're not emptying, this crematorium is kind of in an ideal world, we'll say, is handling this area here, and then this cemetery is handling. I'm moving my industrial area over here, so this was a lot of industry. This is the original industry area. It handled that, and it handled the commercial area. Now for high density, you want to go closer to like a 2-to-1 ratio. So here I haven't filled out all the high density in this area yet, but I have a cemetery here to handle this high density area, a cemetery to handle this high density area, and then I have a crematorium in the middle that can get to here and here. I'll probably put a cemetery here for this area, and then maybe I'll put a crematorium somewhere in this area, and he can also help this area and this area. And then of course this is my high density commercial area. Let's go ahead and put him back on. This is my high density commercial area, so I have a cemetery here that can handle like this area of high density commercial. I have a cemetery that can handle this area of high density commercial, and then I have a crematorium in the service area with a highway express route to both sides. And if you probably added them up, let's look at it again. I got 1, 2, 3 crematoriums. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 9 to 3 would be 3-to-1, and 6 to 3 would be 2-to-1. So I'm at 7. So I'm just around almost a 2.5-to-1 ratio, which is, like I said, ideally about where you want to be. I found in many cities I've built, and that will handle all your death care problems, no problem. Like I said, you want to rotate these on a schedule. So like this one's emptying now. Say this one's at 1,700. I said 2,000, so that was like about 1,000 apart. Not quite 1,000 apart. Like 500 off. So then this one will be the next one to empty once this one's done. Then by the time that one empties, this will be like in say 2,500 range. You empty that one. By the time that empties, this one have probably crept up to 1,800 or something again, and then you empty that one and just keep rotating them. And you should always have like a cemetery kind of emptying. I mean, you won't always, but ideally, you said you rotate them around. That way, if you do get a death wave, your cemeteries aren't full. Okay? That's the bad thing too, is if you forget to empty out your cemeteries, if you wait till they actually get full, then when bad things happen, you're stuck, right? So keep rotating your cemeteries, emptying them, keep those crematoriums working. I think that's about it. You can use elder care to prolong life in certain areas, and that'll once again shift when people die, and that could spread out the death waves a little bit better. I don't really know. I tend to use a little bit of elder care in my high residential areas. This is a neighborhood with elder care. This is a neighborhood that has elder care. I'll probably put like maybe 2 in here, maybe 1 in here somewhere to provide elder care and child care in here too. And once again too, child care will help grow your city and create more children to fill some of those vacant spots that are left by the recently departed. So I mean, it kind of works all together. And that's how I use them. I don't really know how effective they are, but they do. But death care, elder care does prolong the average lifespan a little bit. So Once again, I don't know if it applies citywide, so everyone dies now at 75 instead of 73, or if it's just like, well, people in this area will die around 80, and people are in this area will die around 70, and the average is like 75 or whatever. I don't know. That I haven't really figured out. Maybe you know, and you can post a comment down below, and that add to the conversation. But that's Deathwaves and Deathcare. I hope this is helpful. Leave a comment if this helped you, and if you have any insight or other kind of philosophies that you've used that were successful in your cities, post them down below. And of course, I'll mention it. I have a Let's Play series, so maybe I'll mention it on that, or I'll do a follow-up video and add your information as well. Well, thank you very much for your time, and have a great day, and see you in the next video.